To begin with, I want to just be straightforward. We're here to talk about, of course, our city's art project. And it's a situation we never wanted to find ourselves in. It's a situation that I thought was done when I came into this office about a year ago, but it turns out it's not. So we're going to continue to work on this, and we're here to talk about, sort of another chapter in the ongoing saga. And we're going to get together again next week to talk about a path forward. So, as an overview, folks recall we finished the construction, we fixed a lot of the changes along the route. We also dealt with challenges with respect to federal funding. We secured that funding, and the last issue has been these buses. The buses, of course, are now gone. And you probably, even saw some footage of them having to stop just outside of town to do who knows what. But we are relieved that they're out of our city. But we have to deal with this relationship and essentially how to end it and how to dissolve it. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. So in today's announcement, I'm going to try and keep my part pretty short. The short story is we're taking BYD to court. We need to hold them accountable for what they've done to our city and for their lack of adherence to a contract that they signed. And for us, we're seeking damages for unmet contractual obligations with Build Your Dreams, and our COO Lawrence Rail is going to outline some of that shortly. We're also releasing some, I think, important material. We have an independent study that was done here on the battery life issue. We also have our mechanics reports. This is all going to be available online, and you can see a picture-by-picture accounting, essentially, of all the challenges with every single bus. These are preliminary reports that we're still finalizing because now this is all going to head to court. And so we're happy, though, to be able to share this information so folks can get a little bit more detail on some of these challenges. There's also a little bit more video up as well that is all going to be included in our information packet. Now, for us, I also want to kind of outline how we got here just in terms of this relationship. With BYD, of course, we came into that relationship and we've tried to make it work. We have given them basically a year to try and fix all the issues that we found. And initially we got the right words. In other words, they were always open to fixing these challenges, but the actions were a different story. And they've just never been able to deliver on key areas around battery life and also some of the safety issues that we discovered when we started testing the buses on the route. So I want to tell you that part of the reason why we wanted to make this work was because of our commitment to environmental sustainability. And I'm, in general, a big supporter of electric vehicles and electric buses, and I thought this was one of the exciting parts of this project. The challenge is we were just way ahead of the technology curve, and we were essentially a test subject for this company. These types of the specific type of 60-foot bus in America with this specific setup for an all-battery bus had never been done before. And frankly, all the other bus companies said that they couldn't meet the requirements. And BYD thought that they could, and it just turns out that they couldn't. And so this is a story of our city taking on some technological risk ahead of its curve. And so we're not going to put our city at risk any longer by doing that. And so, our administration, we've signed the Climate Paris Accords. We actually outlined a couple of weeks ago a plan to get to a net zero electricity bill and to diversify all our energy costs into renewables over the next 4 years. We're also looking at some clean fuel options for our trash truck fleet, which we're going to be talking about later, which is actually very exciting. So we are very committed to sustainability and to also doing what we can to help with climate change. But if the technology is not there, it's not there. And so we're not going to put our city at risk any longer with that kind of technology challenge. Now, in the future, I think as soon as even like 5 years, I think the technology will be ready. And so we'll start then looking at diversifying our fleet to electric. But until the technology is ready, we're not going to waste any more time or effort or taxpayer money on it until it's proven somewhere else. And I also want to mention, without going into too much detail, the technology has to work here. We're a city that's in a valley, so these are real issues when it comes to battery usage, that you have to go up a huge hill and down a huge hill, and also with temperature, because battery life in many ways is correlated to temperature. And so, while they might perform a certain way in the middle of winter, it's totally different in summer. And so those issues have to be worked out technologically for our city. I don't really, it's not my concern how these buses perform at sea level in perfect temperature. We need to have them perform for what they're supposed to do in Albuquerque, and that's what we're going to hold them accountable for. So the reports we're releasing confirm what we've been saying in terms of the electric technology just being inadequate for the hills and valleys and the temperatures, and with passengers on board. The other thing is when you add weight, the math all changes, and again, that's where these buses fall short. So sustainable fleets, I believe, are certainly in our future, and actually we're going to take the lead probably on the solid waste truck end, and then we'll look at buses again a couple years down the road. Now, we've exhausted all our options with BYD. We hoped this would work, but it just hasn't. And so we're not going to put up with any more of sort of the broken promises or delays going forward, and we're going to hold them accountable. Now, we don't take this decision lightly. We know that we have to deploy our city legal team, which is headed by our city attorney, Steve Aguilar, and his team to actually process this. Of course, Steve represents our city in the courtroom, and is now, BYD is going to get to know him quite well. And so for us, we've got to do as administration, we're going to work on how to move on going forward, and that's what we're going to talk about next week. And our lawyers are going to wrap up this process and dissolve this relationship in a professional legal manner. Now, for us, we actually, as we've heard, there have been accusations and threats made actually by BYD, and they don't want us to talk about this. But I will tell you, we are committed to transparency whenever we can with respect to any legal proceedings. And I know also I have to stand up for the taxpayers and the citizens of Albuquerque. And I'm not going to let a company, write us nasty letters or say things about our city and just remain silent. I think that's completely inappropriate for a leader of a city. And we stand by truth. And that's what we're sharing with you today. So even if BYD is challenging these claims, we have the reports and the material and so forth, and we've been straightforward about this from day one. And so now we're going to let the courts sort the rest of it out. So with the details on the lawsuit, as I mentioned before, that this is something we tried for a year. We actually offered them the opportunity to go to mediation, and they didn't even call us back. So we would have hoped that we could do this outside of the courtroom, but they've literally left us no alternative. So as we enter this arena, also there's going to be certain things we can comment on and so forth, obviously, because some of it will be tied up in court. But we will continue updating the public as best that we can. And I think most importantly, next week, we're going to talk about the path forward. And we're going to let BYD and our lawyers deal with the rest. And our city is going to move on. And we're going to move on without BYD. So to tell us more about some of these details, our city COO, Lawrence Real.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. Let me begin by saying that BYD has failed to meet the contractual obligations laid out by the city. If you'll recall, the city in 2016 issued an RFP to solicit companies to basically build the buses for the ART project. BYD was awarded the contract, and as a result of that award, we have been working with BYD for the last 12 months, as the mayor said, trying to get the issues resolved. BYD has caused delays in this project because of the equipment not being, basically not being functional in the corridor, and as a result, our citizens have been, in a hardship situation because we are not able to operate the project as originally planned. The delays were basically buses were not delivered on time. We were told by the company and per the contract that these buses will be delivered sometime in October of 2017. The first order of buses did not arrive to Albuquerque until late November and early December. Subsequent buses were delivered in February, and there are still other buses that have not been delivered to date. So with these delays have created obviously a contractual, if you will, issue for the city, and as a result, we have not been able to operate in the corridor. An additional issue that is important here is that the buses were also supposed to have gone through what's called the Altoona testing, which is the Federal Transit Administration's durability test that's required in order to use federal funds to procure buses. Again, the city was informed that by the second quarter of 2017 that those buses would have gone through the Altoona test, and we would be in a position to use those buses. When the buses left Albuquerque last week, the buses still have not been certified through the Altoona testing. And we do not know when those buses will be certified simply because of the delays in getting information from BYD. So as a result, we find ourselves in a very difficult position as it relates to the project. The last issue I will reiterate is what the mayor said, and that is the life of the batteries. Again, our RFP specified a certain amount of mileage, if you will, per battery charge, which was 275 miles. In our testing early in June and July, as our drivers began doing driver training, the best we could get out of the buses was about 175 miles to the charge. So about 100 miles less than what was originally scoped in the RFP. Again, in our effort to work with BYD, we asked BYD to come in and look and see if we might be able to put a charging system at the end of the corridor of each of the routes, so that while the buses were dwelling at the station, we would plug them back in and hopefully get a little more life out of the batteries. BYD agreed. BYD said that they would come in at their expense and build these charging facilities. They never did. And as a result, we were not able to again, run the buses because it would create a problem for us operationally, because we would need more buses to run in the corridor because of the life of the batteries created a significant operational issue for the city. So these are the issues that have been incredibly difficult and challenging to this process. But again, another important piece of this is the safety of the buses and the safety issues that we have encountered and that we encountered when we began doing the bus driver training program in early July. The safety issues are numerous. Some of them we were informed that BYD had resolved, and as a result of running the buses and beginning to use the buses in a real life training situation, additional safety issues occurred. And to describe those safety issues, I want to introduce a couple of individuals here that are standing here to my right. First of all, Greg Gallegos, here to my right, has been in the fleet maintenance division for the City of Albuquerque for 14 years. He's a maintenance supervisor, and he holds multiple automotive service excellence certificates. He is working on his MBA and has been one of our key individuals in helping us do the assessment of the actual safety issues and mechanical issues with the buses. Next to him is Lieutenant Chris Carlson, who will discuss with you shortly a little bit about the issue associated with the batteries in terms of the safety of the batteries and the issues that could result if there was an accident in which the batteries might experience a severe impact from an automobile or so and maybe cause a fire. So with that, let me have Mr. Gallegos come and visit with you a little bit about the mechanical issues and the safety issues.
Thanks, sir. I've only been with the city 4 years, so.
No.
Yeah, it's a big difference. Well, thank you. So when driving began, our drivers saw issues including bolts falling off doors, doors opening on their own, and battery range issues. As a result, the city's transit maintenance department inspected each bus for safety issues. And the buses are inconsistently assembled, and there are varying issues with each bus, but we found a lot of issues that were fleet-wide as well. I'll go through each issue individually. We'll start with the braking issues. So the way brakes work on a bus is they're all controlled by air pressure. The main issue we have is that the BYD bus will operate with the parking brake released with less than 40 psi of air pressure in the front tank. And the front tank only controls the front axle or the front braking system, which actuates things called brake chambers. And 0 psi or no air pressure in the center or rear tanks while the bus is able to operate. This means that the bus is only able to use the front brakes to stop about 62,000 pounds with no people on it or unloaded. There's many implications concerning this when operating in real-world applications, such as losing air due to ruptured lines or damaged leaking air lines that operate the brake system. It will not disable the bus and cause the bus to only operate on the front axle brakes. There are also multiple door issues, starting with the emergency release. When the emergency release is activated, the bus has a brake interlock system which should engage and stop the bus from moving. And an audible alarm should sound when the emergency release is activated. The bus does not stop, the interlock does not kick on, and there is no audible alarm sound to alert the driver of the emergency release pulled. And then once the doors are open on the bus, the brake interlock should also be engaged again, pretty much disabling the bus from driving. The interlock does not engage, and the bus can begin moving with the doors open. No audible alarm is sounded, no audible alert for the driver. On the front street side door, so on the driver's side, so it's like the center door, but it's the front street side door on the driver's side. If that door is open while the bus is moving, there should be an audible alarm letting the driver know that the door is open. There is no audible alarm, and the BYD bus will continue moving without the interlock being applied, so there's no brakes or audible alarm stopping that or immobilizing that bus with the door open. The sensitive edge control line on the doors is getting pinched, and in some cases is already cut, which disables the safety mechanism. The sensitive edge is a mechanism in the exit doors that prevents doors from closing due to obstructions in the doorway, which really keeps people from getting stuck in the doors while they are closing. And there is no audible alarm when the obstruction is sensed at this point. And then without that safety mechanism in place, a person could get stuck in the door and no one would know that was operating the bus or the driver. As we looked underneath the bus, we found incomplete, improper, cracked, missing, and rusted welds throughout the BYD buses. This is a big problem for us because it could compromise the structural integrity, longevity, and durability of the bus. And then we also have a lot of problems with just lines. So high voltage cables, air lines, brake lines, electrical harness, fire suppressant lines, and coolant lines are all rubbing on multiple places and with each other. They're not secured properly. A lot of times the main source of securement is zip ties instead of isolated and properly secured. This is a problem because any one of these lines or hoses could be rubbed through at any time, causing a single or multiple system failure. And then the bridge plates are malfunctioning. There should be safety mechanisms involved in those too, but they should not be able to move with a lot of weight on it. They should not be able to extend or compress back. There should be some kind of safety mechanism to release that pressure and not cause any injuries to any passengers riding. There's a quantum restraint system on the buses, which is kind of an automated wheelchair securement system. And we found that when the driver is switching his control fan from high to low for the driver's fan itself, it actually terminates the power to that quantum restraint system. And it takes about 10 seconds, a minimum of 10 seconds to reboot after the bus has been stopped. So the bus has to be stopped in order for that system to reboot. And there are no warning labels concerning the high voltage cables with exposed metal lugs on the battery connections. So there's bare connectors on these batteries, and we have measured them out at 350 volts DC. That's a very high voltage and could be fatal if touched. And that is all I have at this moment. I'd like to turn it over to Lieutenant Carlson.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm just here to talk about some of the concerns we have from a safety perspective with the buses, and really just kind of based on our observations and with the time that we spent with the buses, we have some safety concerns. So battery fires in general can be very difficult to extinguish, in particularly high voltage batteries. On these particular buses, those high voltage batteries are located all over the bus, and including on the roof. But the primary concern are the ones that are housed within the or accessible from the actual passenger compartment of the bus itself. If one of those high voltage batteries has a thermal event, right, through a malfunction of the battery or through heavy duty cycles or something like that, our concern is that the byproducts of combustion or toxic smoke and the way that they're housed are going to immediately leach into the passenger compartment of the bus. Right? Those battery compartments are accessible from the passenger compartment, and if that leaches into the compartment, the riders are immediately going to feel those effects of that smoke. And if the driver doesn't immediately recognize the hazard, bring that bus to a stop and start that evacuation, escape is going to be unlikely. So the battery compartments are equipped with fire suppression systems. If that fire suppression system does activate, kind of the same primary concern is that the fire extinguisher byproduct is going to leach into the passenger compartment, which is going to make it difficult to see, it's going to make it difficult to breathe, and is going to act as an irritant for all of the passengers on the bus. So if the fire suppression system isn't effective in stopping the fire, those batteries are contained within basically an aluminum structure or aluminum box, which we feel is going to fail very quickly under fire conditions, which is only going to add to the rate of fire spread moving quickly through the bus. Right? And not just through battery failures, through motor vehicle accidents can compromise the battery structure as well. So the likelihood of an event like that happening is a concern for us. Again, that's just a very small taste of the safety concerns in addition to everything else that we've talked about today. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for sharing that. And let me just wrap up with a couple of things. So in the packet of information which we've furnished to everyone here and also will be posted online, there's a report that is about the battery life issues that was done by an independent party that has a long history. It's kind of the industry standard. Also in here is the LA Times article. So we're not the first ones, obviously, to deal with this issue. So the LA Times has outlined this with several other cities. So I can empathize with both LA and Columbus, Missouri, who got the LA buses that didn't seem to work either. There's also in here, excuse me, all of these different reports and graphs and charts for every bus that outlines all the issues that our team has found to this point. And so you'll have visuals and so forth for all of that. You can see some of these here, some of those welding jobs and so forth. So that material is all now available to the public and available for folks to look through. And then let me, I think, really close with this. Remember, in just some facts to note, I know there's a video with this metal thing being flipped. That weighs 180 pounds.
118 pounds.
118 pounds. So that is the visual of the bridge plate issue that you described. So I just wanted to connect that description with also that visual. And then also, Lieutenant Carlson, he is, just so you know, his what he does for our city, he is in charge of extraction when you're in a vehicle accident for all of our first responders. So that's what he trains on. So he is our city's expert on these matters and deals with them every time they happen in our city. Okay, so with that, I think we're here for your questions.
The lawsuit going forward, is this just to get us out of the current contract, or are you also looking for some kind of reimbursement?
The lawsuit that our office, working in conjunction with our outside counsel, is to pursue damages relating to the contract.
Can you give us a dollar amount?
We can't at this time. That matters to be decided by a jury. We have filed a jury demand, so everyone is aware of the allegations and the counts in the complaint that we have asserted are breach of contract, breach of warranty, negligence, negligent misrepresentation, fraud and misrepresentation, and violations of the New Mexico Unfair Trade Practices Act.
Has there yet been a response from the company? Because I know last week is when we sent the buses back. That would have been the first time they might have said something. Any kind of response to this yet?
In response to what?
Anything. The fact they're going back, the fact that it's been terminated for the contract, anything that's happened, I guess, in the past week, has there been a response?
Our attorneys have been working with the BYD's counsel at various stages throughout the last several weeks. But as the mayor alluded to earlier, specifically relating to the mediation process and steps moving forward, we have not had constructive dialogue with them on that.
Where is that lawsuit filed?
We have filed in the 2nd Judicial District Court in Bernalillo County.
How closely did you work with some of the other cities that had previous contracts? You said LA and Columbia. I guess reaching out to them to kind of find out what you guys had in common, and did they pursue legal action as well, do you know?
So with respect to legal action, you have to check with them or research. I certainly, through the Conference of Mayors, have talked to a lot of mayors about these issues. The discussions, though, obviously get technical pretty fast. And so really what we've tried to do is have transit departments reach out to transit departments. So Bernie's been in touch with a few. We tried to lease some other buses from different cities. So we've been in touch with a lot of them. But obviously when it comes to like contractual obligations, this is really about Albuquerque and BYD.
And you said that you guys reached out to him, tried to settle everything out of court. It kind of sounds like that you guys are pretty frustrated that you wanted to settle it, and get it out of the way and everything, but they are just refusing to meet you in the middle in any way. Would that be safe to say?
I mean, they didn't even answer our requests, and so I think that's just unfortunate. And so for us, we want to professionally deal with this issue. I mean, this does happen in the course of cities and businesses. I mean, courts and lawsuits occur. And so we now believe that's why we have to do this through the court process, because we've lost faith in their ability to even reply to offers to mediate.
Was any of the funding contingent on the buses being fully electric? Like, will that affect?
There is some parts of that, and I think Lawrence is probably the best one to speak to that.
So part of the agreement with the Federal Transit Administration is that when the city was procuring the buses, the FTA did give the city an opportunity to basically to look at this technology and look at electric buses. And so part of the $75 million that the city received, a small portion of that, about less than $6 million, was part of the incentive to look at electric buses. We actually are en route next week to meet with the FTA. We've kept them in the loop through the course of this process over the last 12 months about where we are with this particular issue. So they are working with us to look and see if we can use a portion of that money to purchase buses in the future. And so we're working through that.
So that's obviously a consideration for some of the lawsuit. It's also something just to note that the FTA is already doing some investigative work on BYD with respect to the Buy American program. So we've been in near weekly contact with the FTA, and that's a good thing. And so they've been well aware in advance of almost every action we've taken and been able to provide advice.
So how soon could this happen? The court proceedings, how soon could they start?
We filed a lawsuit today, and so we will proceed through the normal course of how that, we filed our complaint, they will file an answer, and we'll move forward from there. And we'll continue to keep the public updated on developments to the extent that we're permitted to as we move through this process.
Do they have a certain amount of time to answer? Is it like 2 weeks, a month, do we know?
Typically, they'll have 30 days
30.
to file their answer.
Do you expect anything in the way of a countersuit from BYD?
We anticipate anything, so that's obviously we would expect that they will file their own claims, but we're confident in the facts that are before us, and we will aggressively defend the city.
Any update with the new flyer buses, when they'll get here, cost, maybe driver training, any of those details?
So lots next week, and so we have tentatively, I think Tuesday we might be talking about a lot of those details, and so we'll be ready at that point to really answer those questions.
What's the current price tag on this, and then is there sort of a risk with going forward with litigation that we could end up sort of piling on more costs?
So I'll talk about the procurement of these buses was a little over $23 million for the electric buses. Each bus, I believe, Bernie, was about 1.2 million or so. So that is the cost associated with just the simple procurement of the buses. As our city attorney will tell you, and all of us know, the litigation issues will be a long process. Obviously, we're prepared to work with the courts and move forward on this issue, but that's the best I can tell you as it relates to the procurement piece of the buses.
I just want to add to the new buses, which we'll have more information on. We have already shared, right, are cheaper. And so we actually think that net this actually is going to all wash out. That's what we believe at a minimum, if not us actually recouping more. So we feel good about that from a respecting taxpayer money perspective. This is actually just a better way to go from that standpoint. And so that has to do with the bus costs. And also, you know, it's fairly obvious, but look, this is a large city. We deal with courts and lawsuits quite a bit. We have a large legal team and so forth. So we're ready and equipped to deal with things like this. They actually happen quite often. They're just not usually quite in, you know, the public spotlight like this one.
So it's possible you guys could come out in the black as opposed to in the red after through all this, if you win the lawsuit and everything.
I hope so. Yeah, it certainly is.
Were there facilities built specific to the bus that are now obsolete, charging stations, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, there are.
So the city did, through the course of the project, build facilities at the Daytona facility on the west side to bring in the electrical power to have it available, so that when the actual battery charging facilities were installed, that the electricity was there on site. Two things about that. One is obviously part of the system will be they'll be taking the actual, if you will, the pump, the actual charging portion of the facility, because that is part of the BYD's proprietary system. The good news is that now we have the power to the facility, as the mayor said earlier. As technology improves and batteries get better, we are certainly not opposed to looking at electric buses in the future as this process gets better and better. And just by way of information, you know, years ago when I was here before, you know, CNG buses and clean diesel buses were new as well. And when we first bought our first CNG buses, it took a while before they got better and better, and now we run CNG and clean diesel buses all the time in the city. So we think that there's an opportunity for us to use this investment in the future as the technology gets better and better with these battery operated buses.
Do you know the cost of running the power into that system?
Roughly the cost to actually put the infrastructure in was somewhere between $3 and $4 million, and it's obviously the city owns that portion of the system.
And one thing I want to mention to all of the, with respect to the technology and the battery life and even the Altoona testing, we're always referencing these specific buses. These are the 60-foot buses that were built for our route. And so we also want to acknowledge, like, yes, there are lots of electric buses, but they're 40-foot and they're for different things and so forth. So the technology issues are specific to that type of bus at that weight in this city with the hills and the temperature. That's where all of these contract violations lie, and that's where the facts are pretty obvious.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Mayor. Absolutely.
I know we're not on the other side of this yet, but at this point, are there any sort of takeaways the city has gleaned from, I don't know, taking on a project of this size, or?
You know, I think there are lots of things that we've learned, also that it would have been obviously more helpful if they would have been learned in advance. But look, I think there is something about when you take on technology risk as a city. We all love the idea of innovation and technology, and I mean, that's core to a lot of the things I do as mayor. But you also got to understand what you're putting at risk, and you know, for a city of our size, the pain that we went through and the trauma that Route 66 has gone through to put this in, you know, was that worth being the first city to have these fancy electric buses? I don't think so. I mean, I think that's what this all shows, is that, you know, we probably should have taken smaller steps. We probably should have waited and used proven technology. So it's a really, I think it is a story about, like, you got to understand the downside of technology risk and understand what you're putting at stake. And in this case, we put at stake several years of all the businesses in our life up and down our mother road and Route 66. That was too high a risk, and we shouldn't have taken it. All right, well, thank you guys. And here's all the information as a courtesy to Felicia. If you ask questions, we're going to first say, like, it's in here. So just, you know, remember that, especially because of courts and things like that. So there's a lot of material here. So if we're pointing you to all of this information, that's because the answers are there. All right. Thank you.
And that's on the government website, the city website?
Yeah.